You raise the question about, as it were, America now having gone ahead. I mean, if we're going to use heavily loaded terms, on the path of freedom. Britain lagging very conspicuously behind. And what I'd like us to talk about now is how that's happened and what America might do about it. Because of course you've got a very unusual presidency. I mean, you were talking in your introduction about the special relationship. Actually, for an awful lot of presidents, the special relationship hasn't been remotely special at all. If you look at Obama, he seems positively to have disliked Britain. Biden, of course, despite the fact that his ancestry is half English, is only interested in doing the Irish, and he does the Irish in the very nastiest, and in the Irish Republican, not in your sense of the word, but in again profound hostility to the main British tradition. With Trump, and particularly with J.D. Vance, we've got something completely different. We've got Trump knowing about his English descent, talking about his grandmother with affection, a deep sense of half my family is Anglo-Scottish and whatever. And even more so, I think, interesting is J.D. Vance. I mean, am I right, my memory serving me, that he's actually had genetic testing?
Just recently, yeah.
Which shows that he is 99% English.
Yeah, so as were the founders.
Now you see, that's exactly what I'm wanting to get us to. I mean, isn't part of the problem that's gone wrong is that we've forgotten America really is the first daughter of England.
Absolutely.
All the debates of that astonishing constitutional convention and whatever are English gentlemen with the odd English merchant.
Yeah.
They're primarily Virginian gentlemen who've got exactly the same values as somebody from Surrey or whatever. They study the same books, they read the same periodicals, they drink the same staggering quantities of booze.
Yeah, look, the great documents were in many respects, as you said, written by Englishmen, but also based on the great English documents, the Magna Carta and the Bill of
Bill
Rights.
of Rights, particularly the Bill of Rights. Yeah.
And look, I think, the pushback started, yes, it started in America, but I also think wokeism and cancel culture also started in America.
Totally.
So, maybe there's just a bit of a lag. You're right about the electoral cycle, but I think the way that we win this argument is by persuasion, by making the case, by speaking the truth. And when you started seeing that, common sense revolution, it's working. And I started in 2020. I didn't have the influence, of course, that some other people like yourself and the Tucker Carlsons of the world have, or Megyn Kelly. But even just, I mentioned the BBC asking the loaded question of, are the riots in America, justified because of the epidemic of unarmed black men being killed by white policemen? And it's completely absurd.
Of course, it's a total lie. It's a complete lie.
It was just outrageous. So I often quote Heather McDonald from the Manhattan Institute, who's written a lot on this. And at that time of the drug overdose, there had been 1,000 people the prior year killed by police. 23% were black, but blacks commit 53% of the homicides and 63% of the armed robberies. So you're twice as likely to be killed by a policeman in America if you're white. And so, that just freaked them out, of course. I mean, needless to say, I wasn't.
These facts are wonderful.
And that's what Charlie did so well. And needless to say, David, I wasn't called by the BBC for probably a year after that. Same with the Charlottesville hoax, when I corrected CNN on that. That ended my career as a commentator on CNN. I had a contract with them. Crazy, absolutely crazy. So
can we just go back to how this is now working out in practice? Because it seems that you were being very kind about what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to do what you've been talking about. What I'm using a word I suspect that Charlie would have used himself. I call what I'm doing at the moment evangelizing. I'm trying to get people to understand what's happened to Britain because, of course, that common Anglo-Saxon inheritance that we've been talking about now, which seems to me to be the key thing that made both Britain and America special. I mean, I think the great historical question is: was the American Revolution a state founded on new principles, or merely a reenactment, a relocalization of those of England? My view is the latter. That the whole notion, which some scholars call the great derailment of America, the idea that it's a state founded on the new principle of equality, preposterous. If you actually look at the Constitution, I point out the second clauses of the Constitution immediately begin deciding who is an American. He's got to be born here. It's not just anybody. He's got to be a person in good standing, of a certain age, of a certain degree of property, and then you go on and you work out percentages of blacks and whatever who count towards being human. It's that wonderful second section of the Constitution that throws any notion, is a huge arithmetical overthrow of any simple idea of equality. But you see, what I think has happened, and this is where I think I might need to bring you up to speed. What's happened in Britain since 1997 is we genuinely had a real revolution. I think the American Revolution succeeds because it's not a revolution, it's a rebellion. In other words, the values, the language, the law, the property rights, everything remain the same. It simply, is America to be ruled by itself, or is it to be ruled by delegated authority from the British Crown? It's no more than that. But from 1997 in Britain, we had a genuine shift, or rather superimposition, of a new political structure, which is essentially a European political structure. We substituted the rule of experts through our quangos, through our quasi-autonomous non-governmental organizations, of which, of course, all the things that Elon Musk was attacking, the various, what you call them, the federal, what do you call them?
Yeah, the unelected bureaucracy.
The unelected bureaucracy, the Washington bureaucracy, the swamp, very, very similar. We have 444 plus of these things controlling nearly a third of state expenditure with no democratic impulse. So Blair sent enormous amounts of power into the permanent bureaucracy. And then on the other hand, exaggerating America right from the beginning with the setting up of the Supreme Court and that great coup by the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court that effectively turns the Supreme Court into the final resolving agency of your Constitution. Blair then also imports something like that into Britain, and again, it's so interesting how debates on either side of the Atlantic echo each other. If you remember Corny Barrett, when she slapped down the Democrat DI hire on the Supreme Court and said, you're arguing against an imperial presidency and you want to replace it with an imperial judiciary. Well, that's exactly what Blair did in England. And the result is we've now got, and I'd like to put this to you, there are actually two different understandings of democracy on either side of the Atlantic. You have still got, just thanks to Trump's victory, thanks to the Republican victory, you've still got the old idea that democracy has something to do with the rule of the majority, of putting the interests of the state first. On this side of the Atlantic, the way was led by Germany, and the reaction to the alleged role of the German people in spawning the horrors of Hitler. Germany beginning the way, there has been a profound mistrust of democracy. And instead, we've invented this thing called liberal democracy, which isn't the rule of the majority, it's the protection of minorities against the majority through the machinery of law. And it seems to me what we're now seeing, you saw it most clearly when Vance came over a few months ago, and you had that great confrontation in Munich. And if you remember, he told Europe, we've got to put freedom of speech, whereupon the German chairman of the meeting broke down in tears. Can you imagine a middle-aged diplomat?
I know.
I mean, again, exactly the sort of thing Charlie was doing. Challenged in debate, has got no answer, but dissolves in tears. And I'm not sure that this is fully understood in America. And I think it's really, I'm sure it's not fully understood here, that there are now two completely different views. One is that the power of democracy has got to be bridled as much as possible by non-democratic or even anti-democratic institutions, and the other is, which one's seeing seeing with MAGA and Trump, that finally the will of the people, we the people, have to be given. They are the final source of authority. Their will finally has to be respected.
Oh, absolutely. And we were running down a really slippery slope, with the Obama years and the Biden years. And you saw the legislation from the bench. And that's not the way it's supposed to work, right? You should legislate from Congress. Those are elected by the people.
Again, the whole issue of abortion. I mean, everybody's saying the Supreme Court declared it illegal. It didn't.
No.
It should go back to the states.
Right, exactly. And that I still hear that term, but Trump's a misogynist because he outlawed abortion. Well, no, that doesn't make you a misogynist, even if he could outlaw abortion, which he can't. And so it's just completely absurd when you hear that rhetoric. And again, going back to Charlie, he just told the truth. I was on Al Jazeera yesterday, and they referred to Charlie Kirk as someone who, made racist comments and homophobic comments. Not true, first of all, but also that he was against reproductive rights. And I wish he was alive to argue with that. But
yeah, I was going to say, isn't it extraordinary that the triumph of feminism is to define reproductive right as the absolute right of a woman to abort a fetus. Now, I am not a Christian. I have very different views on the subject, but the sheer logical absurdity, the complete self-destructive preposterousness of this